So yes, childbirth. I know that for women who haven't had a child, people with women with sickle cell who haven't had a child, it can be very disconcerting and almost like, well, what does it feel like? You already hear from mothers who don't necessarily have sickle cell discussing just how painful it is and how but then at the same time, you see them on the other side as well. You see the part where they're now holding their babies and saying, yep, it's not a big deal. Because there's something about the pain of childbirth which I swear it's kind of connected to the short-term memory. Because I'm sure that if it remained, if remembering that pain stayed in the long term, like, really being able to relive it all over again, I don't think we women would have children. That's just me being real, Okay, so the first time I had a child, of my first born, my son, when I actually realized I was pregnant, it was through having a crisis. I had a crisis that was so severe and there seemed to be absolutely no reason for it. I could not possibly fathom the reason that I was in this degree of pain. Usually when you have a sickle cell crisis, you can maybe trace it back to, okay, maybe I ate something that was not in agreement with me. Maybe I overexerted myself the other day. Okay, I've had a bit of a stress build up. Okay, I was out too much in the cold. Maybe I've been dehydrated. You can kind of, line it up with something. But in this particular case, I had nothing that I can, recall as to why this pain was, gripping me so badly. So I had to be rushed to hospital, I had to call the paramedics, had me rushed to hospital and so on. So, on being admitted to the hospital, in the UK here, we usually have the doctors or, the medical staff in A&E request for you to have a x-ray or an ultrasound just to see if everything is going on okay on the inside. And it was kind of like at that point that I realized that I was pregnant. And it turns out that the pain I was in was due to the fact that I had just conceived. That's right, it was the conception that caused that degree of pain. My body had to kind of, I guess, recalibrate itself for being with child now. And it was such a strain on my body that I did end up having a really horrendous crisis. I think that one must have been, I was about 3 weeks into the pregnancy at that time. After that, everything was more or less okay. They kept a close eye on me and, they wanted me to keep coming in for, antenatal clinic and all that kind of stuff. And I was assigned a midwife and so on. A couple of times throughout the pregnancy, I did suffer even, just as much pain. And had to be admitted to hospital. I was really, really upset by this because, of course, this means that I would have to be taking, narcotics. I'd have to be taking very high strength pain relief that I wasn't happy with, because I'm very much, although I do have to go to hospital and I do find myself having to take morphine, aside from that, I'm very much a holistic person. I don't like having to take pain relief unless I really, really absolutely have to. So it's one thing for me to have to take that kind of pain relief, but for me to be with child and take that kind of pain relief, it was like I cannot do this. So I spent majority of those crises not taking anything at all, and it was very much unbearable. Eventually the doctors had to sit me down and say, look, at this time your body will protect the baby and will filter out the drugs, and it wouldn't reach the child too much and not affect the child, but at this stage They said maybe later on in the pregnancy, as the child gets bigger, then there might be a possibility of a little bit more seeping through. But because of the level I was taking, because I was not a consistent drug user, my body should hopefully protect the child. Eventually I had to kind of buy into what they said and take pain relief, and for me it was heartbreaking. What can I say? But it was a case of, if I didn't survive, the baby of course was no way going to survive. So that was during the pregnancy. The actual childbirth itself, my first child, there were a few complications in the beginning, and eventually I had to succumb to having what do you call it, an epidural, basically morphine in the back of your lower spine. And I really held fast that I didn't want that, because I really wanted a natural childbirth. But right at the last minute, when issues started coming up, I had to be given an epidural. So I couldn't really say what that felt then. But with my second child, I did manage to have a natural childbirth. Still not at home. I did want to have a childbirth at home, but that wasn't possible. But I had a natural childbirth. So when I first went into labour, I think for at least the first, let's say about 4 hours. My second labour was about 4.5 hours long. For the first 4 hours, I didn't even realise I was in labour. It's only when I finally began to realise, hold on a second, why is this pain surging like every few minutes? And then I actually had to, sit in front, with a watch, just looking at the watch and timing how it happened. And sure enough, it happened like every 5 minutes. Then it went to every 4 minutes, and then every 2 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in labour. This is what I've been in. I've been in labour all this time. It felt identical to a sickle cell crisis. I would not have known if it wasn't for the fact that something told me, check the time. So by the time I got to 4 hours, everything was going crazy. It was like, okay, rush, get into the hospital. My partner sped me to the hospital. We thought I was actually going to give birth in the car, because by now it was like every minute that the contractions were happening. When I actually got into the labour ward and so on, the midwife was there to meet me, and she was like, you're handling this just fine. I'm just going to let you go on ahead. And by that time I was like, give me drugs, okay? Forget the natural childbirth, just give me drugs, yeah? Because it was literally like a hospital level crisis. This midwife, love her or hate her, she was like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to give you anything. I'm just going to let you give birth, because you are handling this so well, you don't even realise. And she literally just left me there. She just left me there to give birth, and literally only came when the head actually popped out and decided, oh, okay, let me just guide the rest of the body out. And that's how it was for me. So yeah, that's what childbirth feels like. It feels like having a severe crisis. You can make it through having a natural childbirth, but obviously it is very much recommended that you have a midwife to look after you throughout.